Warchant game day underway. Week 2, Florida State, a robust 1-0 after defeating Alabama convincingly, I might add. Welcome in. Always appreciate it. Happy Saturday morning to you all if you're watching on YouTube or you're listening, however it is you're taking in the show. We appreciate it. I'm Jeff Cameron. That's Tom Lang. Florida State gets to suit it up, do it again today, kickoff at noon. We're here with you early. If you're going to be about town today in Tallahassee, make sure you stop by the Hotel Indigo, our friends housing us yet again for a meet and greet this time around. Certain games, we like to go full on with a pregame show there live at the Indigo, 7th floor, overlooking the intramural fields and, of course, the beauty of Doak Campbell Stadium. Other games, we will knock this out ahead of time so that we have the opportunity to hang out and mingle, have a couple cold ones, and enjoy the company of all of you that made your way into town or are in town already. Good times. Good times.
Let's prognosticate here. Is it a bloody Saturday morning or is it a mimosa Saturday morning for you?
I'm going to go with a mimosa. It's effervescent still. I'm not quite ready just yet, especially for the tilt at hand here. It's not exactly Alabama in town, which may require special reinforcements like a Bloody Mary. This is just more of a lighthearted fare, Tom, when we go with the little champagne here in celebratory mode still from last week.
I'm gonna play it like it's Wake Forest offense under Clawson. This is going to be a very late decision on the mesh because I'm going to judge if they've got the zing zang and they've got some nice hot sauce. Both. You got to have good hot sauce and the zing zang. Then I'm good to go, and I'm going to go with the bloody. If it's, like a Tabasco instead of a proper hot sauce, then it's going to be a mimosa or a screwdriver. We could always get a little screwy.
You do like to fall back on the screwdriver. That is a Tom Lang special, the old school. I'm just being introduced into drinking, not making fun of you, but I think many people's first ever drinking experience with hard liquor is with a screwdriver because you ease into the endeavor with the orange juice. And a lot of times when you're a kid and you're underage drinking, and don't do that, kids, that's what's in your parents' cabinet. You can get away with it. That's how it works. A little bit of vodka, a little bit of OJ. Don't do that, kids. We're not here to promote that sort of thing.
I'm just going with comrades instead of Frenchies, but we're both having orange juice this morning is what I'm hearing.
So let's get to the football. And, man, it's fun to get to the football when you have a game like that. By now, you guys have all watched it, I'm sure, 5, 6, 7 times, certainly parts of the game 10 more times. I have certainly thoroughly gone through the game as many ways as you possibly can just to embrace the beauty of a good football team playing a good brand of physical football, and that's certainly what Florida State did. I think we could get into the conversations about what it'll all mean and what it does for Florida State, but I really want to stay in the present here because I don't care what happens, and I said this week on the JCS, weekdays 1 to 4 on 93.3 FM and Warchant TV. I said I don't really care what goes on to happen with Alabama. Here's what I know about Alabama. They have really good players. There's a bunch of really good players, and they're pretty much littered throughout the field. And Florida State's players beat up those really good players for Alabama. And that's not going to change. Whether they go on to have a good year or a bad year doesn't change that they're good players. We know that sometimes good players collectively go on to have bad years. There's a lot to run in a team. See last year's Florida State team, who certainly should not have gone 2-10, but did. That's kind of the reality of everybody's situation in their locker room and their coaches and their players. But what Florida State did physically in this game is impressive, and that won't change. They dominated the offensive line play, and they dominated on the defensive line. And I don't think any of us thought, I certainly didn't, and I'll reiterate that would be the case over 4 quarters in this last game. But it was, and that leads us to where we are now because you come off that win. It certainly does change, Tom, your outlook for the season. The thought now being perhaps, with a lot of football to play, and we're invested, perhaps this is a playoff team in the making. And our mind probably wasn't there. We weren't resonating in the playoff realm before the season. We were in the just get a lot better and make me proud and want to watch this team kind of zone. Now we're in the, you might be something altogether different than I thought you were. And that's what's cool about a dominating win over Alabama right off the bat. So, and I'll set you up for this, Tom, What that does is it changes the level of intrigue and I would say not just game, but play-to-play analysis that you're going to do when you're in a matchup like this against East Texas A&M. Whereas before, you kind of might go through the motions. Now you care about every little nuance of Florida State football. Are they getting better? How many players are playing? What are the rep counts? What's the depth chart doing? It's always ebbing and flowing and moving. Guys are coming in. Guys are falling out. There's injuries. There's everything else. Where are areas that they have to get better at if they're, in fact, going to be a playoff team? Where are areas where they're a little thin and you have to hold your breath? All these things we're going to be watching week to week now, no matter the opponent, and that includes in a game like this against East Texas where, let's face it, guys, there's not even a spread. I mean, you can't even – I mean, Florida State should win this game going away, but how do they go about the process of winning this game?
Yes, choose your own adventure in a way, and let's see if Florida State chooses one that includes bludgeoning the opponent. You mentioned that's what's cool about a win like over the one over Alabama that you're in the discussion. I say that's what's cool about a 12-team playoff too. It goes 0 to 60 really quick if there's a 12-team playoff and you're looking for an at-large spot. The thing I'm going to bring up a visual aid here from our friends at Pro Football Focus because I really think this tells a good story about how impressive Florida State was on the ground last week. I'm going to start very, very quickly with the graphic here that shows you the different gaps, A gaps, B gaps, and then the little code that PFF has for the types of runs. So off the left end is outside wide where the tight end is. ML, MR just means A gap runs up the middle. And here's what Florida State did rushing by direction in the game. And so if you're listening on the podcast, bear with me. I'll try and explain it as much as possible. But if you're just looking at A-gap runs to the left hip or the right hip of the center, Florida State to the left of Luke Pettibone, 1 carry for 5 yards. To the right of Luke Pettibone, 3 carries for 19 yards. This is something we talked about last week on the pregame show that with Tim Keenan the third out for Alabama, might Florida State actually have an advantage right up the middle behind perhaps an all-American, all-conference level center, and Luke Pettibone, who was the ACC Offensive Lineman of the Week, by the way. Well, 4 carries for 24 yards will work. 6 yards a carry is going to work. Through the B gaps on the left side, just 1 carry for 14 yards, that'll work. And then the B gap on the right side, 9 carries for 36 yards. These are all impressive numbers. They're helped by the quarterback, I'll grant you. But, as the week was wearing on and I was reflecting on the game, I was thinking, they hit a lot of runs, but they hit a lot of trick runs. And that's true. Jet end-around motions and reverses to the left, 2 carries for 58 yards. The long one, that was the Mekhi Danzy touchdown. But in the middle, between the tackles running, which is what we saw from Gus Malzahn for years at UCF and Auburn, Florida State made a statement. Traditional runs, with a quarterback or without, that's the name of the game in this offense. Between the left tackle and the right tackle, Florida State was extremely impressive. That's the thing that I'm watching for today to see if they continue to make that their A priority and B priority. And you've got a young running back that's going to be exciting to watch in Usman Kroma, specifically between the tackles. But reflecting on those numbers, buddy, those are extremely impressive numbers against the Bama front that when you're running traditionally, Florida State was still breaking off runs between 4 and 6 yards a carry.
Gus Malzahn's offense predicated a lot on inside zone, and then everything off of that. They run that jet, by the way, almost on every play where we motion constantly, which I love. So that will be the catalyst for success in the other areas. You got to start there in the middle and have success running the ball up the gut. It's the physicality of this offense. We remember it at Auburn, where they did this exact same thing, Tom, where they came right at you and established that they were going to be physical. And then all the tricks of the trade came out, and they test your eye discipline, the motion man, and all the things that they can do off of it. That's the beauty of Malzahn's scheme. There's the good and bad of everybody's scheme. Everybody's got an element to what they run, even wide open 5 wide, run and shoot offenses of yesteryear. You could find something that you liked. You're like, oh, I rather like that. That's a bear to defend. And then other aspects where you'd say, well, I don't love that. It's not nearly physical enough, or whatever the complaint might be. That's true of Gus's offense. It's always been this thing where I've thought, well, there's a little Mickey Mouse to this, but there is a lot of physicality to this, and that kind of changes your opinion about all the gimmicks and the different things. And in modern football, truthfully, things that used to be gimmicks back in the day are now kind of standard implemented in most offenses. There are elements of things that I would have labeled many moons ago as a talk show host as gimmicky. Now almost every offense incorporates aspects of that. So it's fun to watch. I love physical football. It's the thing that stood out most. Last year, they weren't physical through one game. This year, they're very physical on both sides of the ball, because if you flip it, and since we're giving the big overview to start the show here, defensively, that opening drive, you're a little concerned. I understand that Alabama has to earn it. I understand that Alabama was rather a laborious drive, but the fact that when they needed to throw on third down, their quarterback had time to let guys come open, and he put it on them. When they wanted to run the ball, they had several successful runs on that drive where they're attacking the right side over and over and over again. They're to their right. They ran that over and over again early in the game. And I thought, well, they saw something, or they want to exploit something here from Florida State where they don't think the personnel can match up. Later in the game, they had to go away from it. Really, basically, after the second drive, they had to go away from it because Florida State made the adjustments. Tony White and his team made the adjustments, and Alabama at that point's traditional running game got shut down. From that point forward, the only way they could really run the ball was with the quarterback. That's not a feature of their offense. It's not what they want to do. It's not who Ty Simpson is, although I think he's athletic enough to run a system like that. So do you. But this isn't the Alabama pregame show, so we'll let them worry about that. The bottom line is Florida State's physicality, willingness to stick their head in there, come up and stop the run and make big hits and send messages to Alabama. Second drive on, really they were sending those messages in the first drive, even in that Alabama touchdown, but they got the stops necessary to go along with the hitting in the second and third drives, and all of a sudden Florida State found themselves in a position where they were playing with great confidence on both sides of the ball, and that's what the run game does. I think they'll come out that way today. If you can line up and run the football successfully, you're dictating terms. If you can line up and stop the run successfully, you're dictating terms. There it is, in a nutshell, the line of scrimmage. Florida State wins that game that way. Today, they should have an overwhelming advantage against East Texas A&M in the run game. What Tom and I wondered about was, okay, we know that. By the way, last week SMU kind of fooled around, but they got out to a 7-0 lead the first minute of the game. And then it gets interesting. They get a pick six, and it's 14-0. And all of a sudden, you're kind of like, well, they probably feel like the game's already won at that point, and then it gets kind of weird. When does Florida State deviate from the identity that they want to establish week to week in order to get work in the passing game, in order to get work for other receivers, in order to get work for Tommy and the timing with his receivers, but the backups to him as well? So I am curious how the ebb and flow of this game goes today.
It's an interesting thing because we're here to do a pregame show about the game in front of us, but I think you need to look at this holistically as a 3-week process of what they're trying to achieve. You've got 2 outgunned opponents and a bye week in between, and you got to give players a break on the bye week. Like, I believe that's part of the rules. So it's not like that you could just hold a scrimmage next Saturday if you wanted to.
Yeah,
but
you wouldn't want to.
But at Gus would, another scrimmage, a lot of reps. But between these 2 opponents, I wonder if today is about the urgency to establish who you are, and then maybe the next go around against Kent, you establish the things that you want to be, not the things that you already are. Maybe not. Maybe it's the reverse. Maybe today is about, all right, let's get out to a lead, and then once we're out to a lead, let's kind of do a little bit what SMU did and see if we could put some stuff on film that'll scare Virginia and scare Miami, and also sharpen some different tools that we're going to need in the box when we do play Virginia and Miami. It's an interesting choice, but this isn't a typical season in which you're going to have one opportunity like this and then you're back playing a conference opponent or playing a power opponent the next week. This is a bizarre schedule. We said it at the beginning of the year, and it holds true, win or loss against Alabama. Now you've got this whole ramp-up period of time. My guess is because of the urgency that they described in preseason camp and Alabama prep about, they wanted to get these guys on the same page and with the amount of live action plays together. My guess is they do keep it simple and keep the main thing as in terms of their priorities today. Could be wrong, but that's why we watch the game. It's for a different reason today. It's for cultivating answers like that. How good did they feel about what they did against Alabama? Or do they want to go back to the drawing board to drive a point home within their own locker room and their own meeting rooms that this is what they're about? What I do know is that the baseline of this team is going to be for other opponents the rest of the schedule, the next 11 games. Physical on both sides of the ball and annoying on both sides of the ball, because it is an awkward ask to defend us and it's an awkward ask to play offense against us. And that's good news for Florida State.
Take you back to the last very successful season for Florida State. It was just 2 years ago, and we have some similarities. Florida State 45, LSU 24, a convincing win to start the year. The fan base is over the moon, the realization that you're something better than you thought they were, and now you have a layup game the following week that you're hosting. That was Florida State's Southern Miss. Do you recall, even in a 66 to whatever the final was in that game, I believe it was 66 to 13. In fact, I just looked it up. It was 66 to 13. That we were disgusted, or that I was? I thought that game was terribly played, that Florida State went from that wonderful performance against LSU and then had real problems with Southern Miss. And so I don't know, man. I think if I have that order right, maybe I have it wrong, but
well, you're right.
Yeah, no, that bothered me. We couldn't run the ball successfully. We could not consistently line up and run the ball. There were so many negative plays, and the running stats ended up being skewed because of big plays. But the down-to-down consistency of being able to line up and run the ball the way you should be able to run the ball against Southern Miss, it wasn't there. And listen, it didn't turn out to be a problem the rest of the year in the sense that they were going to lose games, because they didn't. But it did turn into a problem overall within the offensive scheme. They could not consistently be who they wanted to be. They were bailed out by Jordan Travis, and they were bailed out by Keon Coleman, and they were bailed out by guys like that. But they couldn't be what they wanted to be. So today I would think this would be an awful lot of let's be what we want to be now. Let's make sure we can be what we want to be.
Yeah, that's where I would even go back a season before where they play LSU and they hold on for dear life, but they were the better team that night. That was coming off of a week 0 game against Duquesne where you got to establish things. But then I just looked back at that schedule to try to remember who they play the next week, and I couldn't remember it because they had a bye. They didn't play anybody. They played Louisville on the road the following week, and that's when Tate had to come in, and that was a crazy night, a weeknight game for Florida State.
Best moment in Tate Rodemaker's football career.
But I think that the blessing and the curse for the 2023 team was that you had already established with Jordan and many of the veterans what you were. And so there wasn't this, I don't think there was this edict with a new offensive coordinator or anything like that where you were trying to achieve basics. That was about luxury. That offense was about a lot of luxury. This isn't. I mean, maybe by the end of the season, we look back and we say, oh, yeah, they had a lot of superstars, but not yet. I mean, I think that's one of the charming things so far about this team after one game is a lot of dudes contributed to that win last week against Alabama, but it wasn't like you walk out of that building or you turn off your television and you say, they have two Jared Verse or Keon Coleman like superstars. Not really. It's the sum of their parts, and it's good timing, and it's confusion, and it's depth on defense. So, what do they do today? I think, again, Tony White's going to rotate a lot of dudes. If you rotated 25 last week, you're going to see probably 30 guys on defense. But on the offense, how many backup offensive linemen get in, and when do they? Randy Pittman's not available for this game. We'll talk about the injuries in a little bit. But what do they do with the tight ends there? Do they break in a couple of second-year wide receivers like an Elijah Moore or B.J. Gibson? What's Lewayne McCoy's health situation like? And does Gus trust them earlier in the game? Do they throw the ball more early? The offense, I think, is probably the focal point today.
DJ Moore, not DJ Moore. He plays for the Bears. The NFL season starting this weekend, everybody. Elijah Moore.
Yep.
Do we see him today? Do we see some guys that we've had high hopes for that for whatever reason have not been able to crack the code and get out there and play a lot of football for Florida State? A lot of fans in the stands today with their binoculars going to be watching very closely to see those wholesale changes when they happen and who those players are. You brought up the offensive line. I've wanted to see Otto play for a while. We know we're going to see Rizzy play, but Lucas Lucas is a guy that, again, sounds like made progress in the offseason, sounds like made progress with Herb Hand, but couldn't do enough to stay consistently on the tip of the tongue. And so how soon do we see him in the game, and how does he look? I mean, these are physically matchups Florida State should have the advantage in. So I'm very curious about a lot of these guys.
We should note, too, as a follow-up, that when we did Herb Hand translated from earlier in the preseason camp, that must have just been a brain fart that he didn't mention Richie Leonard as a leader, because Richie Leonard started, Richie Leonard played every snap, and Richie was good. And Herb praised him this week in his press conference because he was one of those guys that got down on the Gavin Sawchuk play and helped push him over the line. So that must have just been a brain fart on his part that day, because they leaned on Richie.
Well, I wondered, we all did, we were left to speculate, because Leonard was sent to Charlotte. he by definition was sent to Charlotte as a leader to talk on behalf of the team and be the offensive line representative. So I thought to myself, what gives? Well, it was an oversight. Richie played really well, which is exciting. We're going to take a really quick break, come back. We'll do the second half of the program here, including at the end, just for giggles. We'll give you a prediction on the score as well for Florida State and East Texas. You're listening to Warchant Game Day. It's game day. Smile. Let's watch some football.
Hey, this is Jay Green from Hotel Indigo, Tallahassee. Can I stop and say thank you? Thank you for telling your guests to stay with us. Thank you for hosting your corporate meetings and social events in our rooftop meeting space. Thank you for hanging out with us on FSU football game days. Believe it or not, this sales guy isn't selling anything. I just want to say thank you. But if you've never seen our rooftop and I can ever help, give us a call, 850-755-9011. We are Hotel Indigo, Tallahassee. Welcome to our neighborhood.
Chubby's is the ultimate football apparel brand, so much so they created their own fantasy football league. George Kittle, Ian Rappaport, and others have come together to assemble the Chubby's League on NFL Fantasy. Each week, the top 5 scorers will win a chance at Chubby's polo shorts combos with their team's logo. The grand champion gets the chance at the ultimate fan experience, 5-day, 5-stadium NFL game tour with a +1. Hey, now. While the fantasy flop faces a hilarious and unforgettable punishment only Chubby's could pull off, head to chubbysshorts.com/thechubbiesleague to learn more and have some fun. You ready for the most outrageous fantasy football season of your life? Would you look at that, everybody? For a limited time, our friends at Chubby's are giving our listeners $10 with the promo code JCS at chubbysshorts.com/JCS. $10 off your order with the promo code JCS, and that includes the NFL collection. Support this show and tell them that we sent you. Express yourself and level up your game day wardrobe with Chubby's. Welcome back, Warchant Game Day. We are at Hotel Indigo. If you're watching this on your phone, let's say, maybe on the YouTube, and you're driving into town or whatever it might be, swing by Hotel Indigo. That's where you can find us, sipping on a beverage, thinking about the afternoon of football we're about to take in, enjoying the company of our fellow Noles and others there at the Hotel Indigo. Should be a good time yet again today, and I think we're all still basking in the glow, as we say, from a win. You know, one of the things I like as the week goes on after a big Saturday game, and one of these days we'll figure it out. One of these days the access will be available to all of us. But the people who do have access to the all-22s, they begin to leak that as the week goes on. You see different shots and different plays and different players and in an effort to explain why something was or was not successful. And it leaks out really throughout all the big games of college football on your social media outlets. You just start seeing, oh, here's a guy who's a former player that does analysis for LSU, and he's breaking down an LSU Clemson play, showing you why it worked, and it's clearly the coach's copy, which is great. We got some of that this week for Florida State, Alabama, of course, and it happens. It starts to trickle in on a Sunday evening. Then you get a little bit more on Monday. By Wednesday, the ACC network has had all of their guys comment on it, and they've seen the All-22s. If you watch the All-22s from Florida State, Alabama, the interesting thing is the win was more impressive than you already realized it was. The examples you got this week as it went on and we got more and more shots of the coach's film, you saw individual moments that the TV copy did not capture, in which Florida State players were manhandling Alabama players. It could be away from the ball. It could be a block that you think is inconsequential to the success of the play. And yet when you go back and look at it, you say, but that's the kind of effort and kind of dominance that sends a message early. You know, it could be that we run the ball to the right and it's the left tackle just burying somebody. You know, those kinds of things happened a lot on Saturday. And again, another shot in the arm for a program and a fan base that desperately needed it. But that was the fun of this week, as the trickle-down effect was very real. The more people got to look at that game and go, goodness gracious, Alabama, you know, depending on the story you're about to tell, whether you're a network or an individual or the team you cover, you're going to look at it from the standpoint of, hey, Florida State went out there and just bullied Alabama. Or you're going to look at it and say, hey, good win, Florida State, but my goodness gracious, what was with the listlessness of the Alabama players? I get that. That's the nature of the beast. Two teams played in the game. But for our purposes, seeing Florida State dominate Alabama physically is something that, again, is going to make us smile many weeks from now when we hearken back to the game that was played this past Saturday.
Yeah, I'll tell you another thing I saw upon several rewatches, and this, you could find it if you looked hard enough. I meant to bring it up earlier this week on the show, but that defensive hold on the third down throw to Boggs, it's Deuce Robinson on the left. Deuce is going to run way by the left corner. It's to Tommy's left. I mean, it's out the gate. I don't know what happened with that guy because he got beat on a dead sprint. The guy who's defending Boggs got beat on a dead sprint. And then a few plays later on a 3rd and 11, it's Squirrel White who beats his corner on a dead sprint. Buddy, I don't know. Did they think the game was 3:30 Central? Because that's the first drive of the season. And you have 3 instances, 2 on one play, but then another one a couple plays later where maybe the defensive coordinator says, whoa, guys, we need to, wake up a little bit, where you've got Florida State wide receivers on a day when we don't talk about the passing offense because there wasn't much of it, 9 completions over the course of the game. I was impressed by that going back and looking at more. But you're right. Backside of the play, blocks on the perimeter by tight ends and receivers. We all know the Randy Pittman block that everybody saw in the first drive. I think that's when we got called for the hold. But it's near the logo at midfield. Well, how about the blocks for Tommy Castellanos on touchdown number 1? Randy Pittman's involved there. But so's Javen Boggs, who had just dropped the pass, and he finds his guy in the end zone. He starts the block about 2 yards deep in the end zone, and it goes no farther. Tommy Castellanos can waltz in because a freshman wide receiver takes care of his guy. You could go on and on with 25 or 30 examples of individual moments like that where Florida State apparently is hell to play, and that's awesome news for us.
So I would say too that when we talk about those plays, and there are freshmen, there are young players, there are veteran players, and it's joyous to watch. Florida State put schematically, back to your point prior, Alabama in an interesting bind, which was, all right, look, we already know that your linebackers and to some degree your safeties are going to have to deal with the eye candy that Gus brings to the table. But these all-world corners that were talked about all off-season, Alabama's secondary was labeled by many to be possibly one of the best in the country. Their corners in particular are freaky athletes. Well, the squirrel play of which you speak it's just they've got Squirrel White out wide, which I don't think he did a lot of, if any at all, at Tennessee. He was a slot guy through and through. So they used him as the far wide receiver to just run a go. And that's a guy lining up across from a 6'4" corner. So you have a 6'4" sizable corner, and you say to him, well, that's great if we're going to compete for a football in traffic. That's great if you have to come up and stop a run. And that's great if you're facing a 6'5" receiver. But how about here's a little guy that just straight out can fly? Can you turn and burn? Can you turn once you realize it's a 9 and flip your hips and run a 4.4? Because if not, you're going to get run past. No matter how freakishly athletic and hybrid you are, that guy can fly. Can you? And the answer was no. I mean, they put him on an island and said, good luck, young man. Got to admit, if I'm a 6'4" corner, I'm like, hey, brother, I'm trying to run with a 4.39 guy, a 4.42 guy. I don't think that's why you got me here. Yeah, that's a toughie.
over 94% of his snaps in his last 2 seasons at Tennessee for Squirrel White in the slot.
Yeah.
To your point.
Yeah.
But he had shown, and this is where I was so happy on the preseason scout, 2 things. When we got these guys and you're watching all those highlights of the guys you bring in through the portal with production in college football at the power level, like Oklahoma and like Tennessee, is Squirrel White adjusts to the football and fights for the football. For a smallish guy, that's not always the case. For a guy who can fly, that's certainly not always the case. And he had to make the adjustment on that throw to break back towards the middle of the field in order to haul in the pass from Tommy. It's a 3rd and 11, do or die. If that touches the turf, you're punting. And, who knows? It's 7-0 Alabama at that point. That's a big play to be made in that moment. And that starts everything in motion for Florida State. And the thing that ended it for Florida State effectively is Gavin Sawchuk was also a very tough customer, very tough to bring down, understood when to burst, understood when to wait and be patient. But on that touchdown run, as Herb Hand called it a culture play for Florida State this week, he sets the tone. And he puts himself in a position where the offensive line and other players can come and help him. But that's because he's tough to bring down. So you're talking about 2 examples on offense of guys going and doing a little bit extra. And that's what you're going to have to do. I mean, one of the sacks that happens in the first half of Ty Simpson is because of the extra effort on the stunt and the twist and setting a hard physical edge so the quarterback doesn't have a place to break the pocket. Think about that first drive and several situations on Saturday where Ty Simpson, the edge is not dedicated and it's not a tough edge, or I think they call it a hard edge in Tony White's system. So he can break the pocket and scramble. In that instance of one of the big physical sacks up the middle that sets up the field goal that comes up short, you have a player doing something selfless. And then somebody else, DeMonte Diggs, can come up and collect the trash and go get himself a sack. But that is something where Diggs needs to go find his teammate, and he did. And you're seeing those little indications, too, that the glory is shared. I mean, this is just so refreshing on so many levels.
Well, that brings us to today's game, and we'll spend a couple of seconds here on that game. But that is something I think Florida State has to improve on, though. And maybe it's just the byproduct of this defense and the way it's run. But I do think there were too many moments where that outside was available and you couldn't set the edges consistently as you wanted to. And James Williams is an interesting character to watch play football because he's unorthodox in a lot of ways. A lot of times if the edge isn't set and you look to the end that didn't set it, you think, is he soft? Is he light? Is he weak? What's the problem? But he's asked to do a lot of different things in this defense. Sometimes he's told to crash down and take out pullers. Sometimes he's asked to crash down and just earhole the center. And so you watch him and you're like, well, without knowing the call, I really can't be critical here. Was it that somebody else didn't come up and set the edge like they were supposed to? Or was it James? I do know that he missed 1 million tackles. And I love him because I think he's a gamer and he's smart and he's funny and he's tough and he did make a lot of plays. And by the way, havoc plays matter and getting guys off their spot matters. And quarterback pressures absolutely matter. I mean, some defensive coaches will tell you, I'm not overly concerned with sack numbers. I'm concerned with pressure numbers because it changes the play and it changes the platform and it changes what the quarterback sees. That's all well and good. But I can tell you that defenders, when they have a chance to hit a quarterback, really want to make that play. They like their stats, and they know at the end of the day, the NFL likes to look at those numbers. So look for him to have a better day finishing. Have a better day finishing plays. And then for Florida State in general, against a weaker opponent like this, look for Florida State to be a little bit more physical out on those edges against the run today and more consistently set it.
So it depends on who East Texas A&M plays at quarterback. I'm going to go with a sneaking suspicion after watching the SMU game. It's going to be Eric Rodriguez. That's the guy they went to in the middle of the game. Will Madonna was the starter, and you quoted his numbers in the offseason. When people are saying, well, we're concerned about every game because Florida State hasn't given us reason to breathe easy. And I think it was 49% completion. It was under 50% last year.
He was on the struggle bus, yes.
Yeah, he was on the struggle bus, and he certainly was throwing an early pick six against SMU this past Saturday. Well, the Rodriguez kid can go a little bit. And he also, I think there's an opportunity here for Florida State to register a pick 6 or 2. And I know what I'm calling for because it's all about timing in that offense. SMU ran a lot of man early in that game last week. Florida State won't. Their eyes are going to be on the quarterback. They're going to be looking to jump passes, and you don't really have to worry about the double move because you think your front's going to win in that situation. Anyhow, Eric Rodriguez can run. And so I think you're going to get that test again this week. Doesn't mean that he's electric on the ground, but he's aware. He's aware if you've broken contain and you've broken your rules. And so that's something that I think Tony White would love to see this week. You don't want to statue Garrett Nuss. Well, Garrett can move a little bit. Bad example. Mike Glennon type quarterback after you've had a bad go of it when it comes to quarterbacks breaking contain. Some of that was Ty Simpson being extremely athletic and elusive, but some of that is you broke your principles. And Tony White was pissed about that last week in his Sunday press conference when he talked about some of the games and stunts we called did not get communicated in clearly. I think so he was attributing some of the failures to a breakdown of communication of who's supposed to go where to set those edges. That's something that is inside baseball, but is certainly worth watching today because you don't want that to be a trend.
When do you think Mike Glennon's final season at NC State was?
Okay, so I know that 12 he played there. I'm going to guess 13.
12. And
Okay.
What's funny about that and why I bring it up is that I like that you've entered into the age demo where you can accidentally make references to something that feels to you like it was recent history, but is instead nearly 15 years ago.
No, I had to bounce back from a Nussmeier comment to find somebody who is extremely slow and statuesque. I could have just said DJU, but instead I went with Mike Glennon.
No, it just made me smile. I was like, all right, way to jump. Because sometimes I'll make a movie reference or a record reference. Sometimes on the JCS, I'll say something and realize that was 32 years ago. There may be people in my audience who have no idea who Dexy's Midnight Runners are. Like you gotta, like you have to.
Eileen knows, but he actually ended up, I think, breaking. Here's your NC State side of the day. Russell Wilson's passer rating record. It was either his passer rating or his completion percentage number in his final season.
Yeah, and by the way, since we're a little pat on the back to good old Mike Glennon. All 6'7", 235 pounds of them with a cannon for an arm. Played for you kids who didn't get the reference. Played for my Buccaneers, Chicago Bears, Arizona Cardinals, Oakland Raiders, Jacksonville Jaguars, New York Giants, Miami Dolphins. Had more than a cup of coffee in the league. That's a lot of teams. He's got a lot of helmets up in there. You don't care about that, either do I. Let's get back to this and predict what we see here. We see a lot on the play chart, Tom. When we look at the participation chart after this game, get ready to see a huge number. What an opportunity for the coaches today. If the team does what they're supposed to do and they come out and take care of business and they execute early and they're focused and they're intense and they get out to a big lead, this is a chance for the coaches to get kids who maybe are a little frustrated by the fact that they're not higher on the depth chart than they thought they would be, breaking camp. Kids that aren't sure of their role in a system or whether or not they're going to see the field this year. Kids that you want to dangle the carrot to. Kids that you're curious about who were a little uneven, had good day, bad day type camps. All of these guys get opportunities today. And for us as a fan base consuming the game, this is a lot of fun too, because you'll pay attention series to series very closely, even in the third quarter of a blowout, or even in the fourth quarter of a blowout. You're going to be watching very closely to see, they put so-and-so in. I think he's our fifth corner in this defense. They put so-and-so in at quarterback. How about that? That's the kid from East Tennessee State. They put that kind of stuff could happen today. And I think that's fun. When you're a good team, it's really fun. If you're a bad team, you do it because you're trying to hang on to recruits. When you're a good team, you do it partially because of that, but also you want opportunities and you want kids to get opportunities to show their wares.
Well, by itself, you could already go on the attack after beating Alabama the way you did on the recruiting trail. But if you needed something extra, it could be about all those freshmen that participated last week for Florida State. And it wasn't just on defense. Javen Boggs started. Usman Kroma got the most carries of all the tailbacks, running backs in Florida State system. And then, of course, last week on the defensive side, it speaks for itself. The Desir twins and all the linebackers that they got in there, even though they projected that they only were going to play maybe 3 or 4, you saw more than that. If Juju Wynn was healthy, he would have played. This is something where Florida State now can go hit the trail with a win like that and say, you could play early. It's up to you. You have to prove it, but you can't blame us because take a look at that participation report. Yeah. And we weren't playing East Texas A&M the first game. We were only playing top 10 Alabama guys.
Knock on wood today. You get out of this game healthy. You were relatively healthy at the end of last game, save for Randy Pittman being out, unfortunately. Afterwards, we find out he will not play today. A couple guys.
Roydell Williams also will not be available for this game today.
That's right. But the rest of the crew to choose from should be out there, and Florida State hopefully gets a big win today. We'll be back with you again next week for a pregame presentation. 2 weeks, that's right. I forgot about that. We'll be back with you for that next one, Hotel Indigo. All these home games to start the year. We'll do another pregame just like that. But swing on by Indigo today. If you're listening to this and getting ready to walk out the door, we'll be hanging out there for a little while before walking into the stadium and having fun. We always appreciate you watching Warchant Game Day. For Tom Lang, I'm Jeff Cameron. Thanks to our friends at Hotel Indigo, and thanks to all of you. Be well. Go Noles.